Good afternoon, everyone. Before introducing my department, I would like to thank once again Malta Association for the kind invitation. As we are gathered here today to discuss a critical issue in our society, the fight against sexual exploitation. Through this presentation, I aim to share with you the experience of my department and the abolitionist policy adopted by France. And as the last speaker of this afternoon, I'll try to be efficient. So I work within the judicial police of Paris, specifically in the anti-pimping department. In French, we call it BRP. It's kind of a unique and historical unit in France due to its specificity and history. I think. Just to describe quickly and briefly my department, BRP has jurisdiction in over Paris and its surrounding suburbs, and exclusively handle cases of pimping networks involving adults, as well as cases of sexual exploitation linked to human trafficking. With over 120 years of history, BRP has developed a strong territorial network, which is very useful daily. My unit is composed of 50 officers, handling approximately 175 cases and 200 arrests related to pimps a year. We also have a very specific group, which is called a cabaret. I don't know how we can translate it in English, which monitor close to 600 nightclubs and sexually oriented establishments in Paris at night. The work we handle daily is both important and intense. This type of crime, being organized and highly lucrative, makes Paris and its suburbs particularly attractive to pimps. Our significant activity has positioned our department as a recognized and essential partner for judicial authorities, prefectural entities, police stations, and victim support organizations. Almost a decade ago, a landmark law was introduced in France, the law of April 13, 2016. It criminalized the purchase of sexual acts. This legislative measure is a cornerstone in France in the fight against prostitution system and sexual exploitation in France. This law acknowledges prostitutes as victims rather than stigmatizing or penalizing them. It offers them tailored support, including access to social assistance, programs for exiting prostitution, and psychological support. Since then, numerous transformations have occurred, particularly in victim support and the implementation of exit programs. But judicial challenges have also emerged. While street prostitution continues to decline, discreet or indoor prostitution is on the rise. As in many sectors, we have witnessed the Uberization of prostitution over the past decade. Advertisements online in vast quantity involving diverse population. While very difficult to quantify, an estimated 35 to 40,000 sexual ads are published daily in France. As a result, BRP investigators must develop new skills and acquire additional expertise to combat all forms of pimping effectively. The 2016 law remains the cornerstone on the fight against pimping and all forms of sexual exploitation. As the ambassador of France mentioned earlier, the French abolitionist strategy is based on 4 pillars: fighting pimping, the purpose of my department, but also decriminalizing and supporting prostituted persons, prevention of sexual exploitation, and at the end, penalizing and holding clients accountable. This law firmly condemns both pimps and purchasers of sexual services. Clients can no longer claim that their actions are without consequences. Paying for a sexual act is, in our philosophy, participating in a system of domination and exploitation. So we'll present you our strategy for combating pimping perpetrators in the light of the recent developments, and also discuss interinstitutional cooperation to facilitate the exit of the victim from the prostitution system. So I will start my speech with a brief overview of the French positions on prostitution. As I mentioned earlier, France adopts an abolitionist stance on prostitution. This model, rooted in value of human dignity and social justice, rejects the notion that prostitution can be viewed as an ordinary or freely chosen activity. On the contrary, it considers prostitution as a form of violence and a violation of the fundamental rights of those involved. This means that while we tolerate prostitution and protect individuals engaged in, who are considered a victim, nevertheless, we firmly condemn pimping in all its forms, as well as the purchase of sexual acts. When I say we firmly condemn pimping, I mean that our penal system provides us a broad definition of what is pimping, related offenses, as well as a variety of aggravating circumstances. Our legal framework criminalizes anyone who, in any manner, and I really mean it, profit from the prostitution of one another person, aids, assists, or protect prostitution, even without deriving profit. The aggravating circumstances are also numerous and almost always present in our cases, granting us access to special procedure, including the ability to detain a suspect for up to 96 hours and the authorization to employ all special investigative techniques that we will see later. The aggravating circumstances, briefly, are always established in our cases, such as the involvement of multiple perpetrators or victims, the vulnerability, special vulnerability of the victim or their minority. There is also a new aggravation, which is when prostitutions occur by an open communication network, which is always the case. For those offenses, the maximum penalty in such cases is 10 years of imprisonment and 1,500,000 fine. When pimping involves minor under the age of 15, carried out by an organized group, or if the victim is subject to act of torture, the offense became criminal and penalty increased to 15, 20, or life imprisonment, respectively, for the most severe cases. To conclude, our system in 2016, the offense of soliciting was abolished in favor of penalizing clients with a fine of 1,500 euros, often accompanied by a mandatory attendance at an awareness-raising courses. 1,500 is for the first time. When you do it twice, it became near to 4,000 euros. And if there is aggravative circumstances, the clients can go to jail. Far from being a mere statement of intent, this approach is backed by concrete measures. Since the implementation of this legislation, hundreds of victims have been able to benefit from this program and reclaim a dignified life. Now we have reviewed our legal framework, I will present you the the PIMS phenomenon we are addressing today in Paris. And first and foremost, it's important to clarify that the figures presented here are not national statistics, but rather a reflection of my department activity. After a significant decline following the penalization of clients, street prostitution has now stabilized around 280 to 350 street-based prostitutes still operating in Paris. However, these changes, coupled with the Uberization of society, have led to a shift toward discreet, indoor prostitution, bringing new procedural challenges, and also countless online offers for sexual services. Before discussing the investigative techniques we use today to conduct good quality investigation and by consequences satisfactory judicial outcome, I will just outline the two main phenomena we are currently facing. The first one is networks of foreign pimps. Historically, foreign prostitution in France predominantly originated from African, Slavic, or Asian networks. Today, however, we are witnessing a significant rise in the South American prostitution, which now accounts for 50% of our activity. This growing phenomenon, particularly in the suburban house or apartment in the Paris region, is partly due to the saturation of the Spanish market and also the fact that pimp can charge higher rates in France, maximizing their profits. The operations now typically follow the model of discrete apartment-based prostitution and sex tours facilitated by the dissemination of advertisement online. The second phenomenon we are facing is this time from French networks pimps and are called suburban pimp phenomenon. It's about 34% precise of the cases handled by our departments. They are mostly young pimps from suburban areas or so-called sensitive neighborhoods. Many of them have a history of delinquency linked to drug trafficking. They perceive pimping as less risky and more lucrative than other criminal activities, while still adhering to its associated codes. They recruit through their neighborhood, school, or more commonly now, social media. They usually target young vulnerable women who are experiencing family, financial, or social breakdowns. And unfortunately, victims appear to be increasingly younger. If the relationships between the pimp and victim appears contractual, pimps almost never distribute the promised share of profits, usually, as you said also, 50% to the prostitutes. And it's quite always based on the biased consent. In this phenomenon, violence and sexual abuse are very frequent, and among the most brutal networks, they test prostitutes and become a common practice, while for others, violence arises when prostitutes try to leave the network or fail to earn enough money. Nowadays, we have encountered numerous cases where prostitutes, in addition to endure abuse and violence, were threatened by firearms or faced reprisal against their family if they try to leave. These networks are characterized by a high turnover of victims, which in a way limits the profits of the pimps networks because they had to constantly seek for new victims. But it's also a challenge for our investigators because we must identify and protect those new victims. Recently, we have also observed cases where different networks collaborate temporarily with other groups to pool resources, such as women, apartments, or logistical support. Whether we deal with the so-called suburban phenomenon or South American one, the standard process for pimps has evolved as follows. After recruiting their victims, who are always in a vulnerable situation, which can be financial or social, as I said, modern pimps manage online advertisements for the prostitutes by writing and posting ads, paying platform to ensure better visibility, taking photos, and setting rates. Increasingly, they also dictate the sexual practice offered. They act as a call center, responding to client inquiries and arranging appointments. For suburban pimps, the goal is maximum control and maximum profitability, whereas for South American networks, it's primarily to overcome the language barriers. Pimps also handle logistics, renting short-term apartments where the women are housed, and organizing transport between different prostitution sites. They also employ men to provide security at the apartments, which often prioritize safeguarding the money over protecting the women. In 2023, unlike previous years, it became evident that some suburban pimp networks dismantled by our departments have significantly professionalized. Mirroring certain drug trafficking networks, they have begun collaborating with South American offenders who supply them with victims. This demonstrates a fully developed human trafficking system. Ironically, this evolution reflects the effectiveness of our strategy, as criminal networks are forced to adapt and organize more rigorously, adopting strategy typically seen in organized crime. So that leads us to our investigative strategy. While fieldwork remains essential in combating pimping, such as surveillance and tailing individuals involved to understand their role, money exchanges, movement of prostitutes, entry or exit from the prostitute apartments, the majority of our cases now involve cyber elements which vary in complexity. Given the increasingly hidden nature of prostitution, investigation almost always require now phone tapping, firstly to identify the lines linked to the ads, identify prostitution activity, as it is now hidden, to identify apartments, client visits, and of course, pimps. We have to collaborate also with online platforms, requesting data such as bank information used for ad payments, IP addresses, and phone numbers linked to the ad, or at least for the registration. We have engagements also with hotel booking platforms to identify who rented apartments, review past and upcoming reservations. While effective, this strategy encountered challenges. For example, booking platform often respond to our legal issue by canceling reservation or alerting renters about rule violation, complicating our investigations. The mobility of these networks require now phone geolocation to follow movements, and as individuals became more cautious during phone communication, they switched to encrypt application, and in several cases, we intercept data from their device. We also have the insiders, who remain valuable assets in advancing investigation and try to understand them. In my department, we have about 100 insiders who are registered. The financial aspect is also a significant focus in our work. Lastly, our unit is now adept at using seize and confiscation of the assets during these cases. This increases the risk for the offenders, leaving them with fewer financial gains from their crimes. In most cases, perpetrators are surprised by the gravity of the charges and by being detained, even those who played a minor role in the network. At the conclusion of our investigations, we aim to arrest every individual involved in the network in any capacity and to strike hard financially. However, the fight against sexual exploitation cannot reach its full effectiveness without cooperation with both associative and institutional stakeholders. This is why BRP maintains high-quality relationship with associations supporting sex workers, whether through direct contacts or during commissions that bring together magistrates, Ministry of Education, Medical Council, as well as departmental and associative actors. Often undocumented and engaged in prostitution, victims are, we have already seen it, inherently fearful of judicial authorities. Cooperation with these associations help explaining to the victim that in France they are recognized as such and they can testify, file complaints, or collaborate with the police if they wish to. It also informs them about their specific rights as victims, including the possibility of obtaining a temporary residency permit during the investigation or access to EFL coverage. This shared vision between associative personnel and police officers aimed at treating victims with the same care. It facilitates their protections and encourages their participation in advances in cases or investigations. On a daily basis, associations are invited to share their filed observations with us, allowing cross-referencing of information to better progress. We also collaborate with other state services, which is highly effective, notably in dealing with erotic message parlors phenomenon in Paris. We have adopted a multidisciplinary approach. BRP addresses the issue of pimping and human trafficking. Local police stations handles undeclared work and tax violation in partnership with local state actors. And prefecture then generally orders the closure of the establishments. Finally, as mentioned in my introduction, we also maintain a regular contact with the nightlife industry through an almost nightly presence in these venues. This cooperation relies on maintaining an extensive information network and a deep understanding of Parisian nightlife. You have now understood that whether it involves gathering intelligence, aiding investigation, dismantling structure, or facilitating victims' exit from prostitution, my department could not perform this work alone. It is through collaboration with various entities that we achieve effectiveness. Our strategy involves tackling the issue from multiple angles and with multiple partners. So to conclude, the French strategy is based on a firm conviction. Prostitution is not a choice, but often a lack of choice. Since its adoption, we have gained new tools to dismantle pimping networks, and convictions of pimps have increased. While the implementation of this strategy needs to be further reinforced at a national level, we regret that the absence of a common approach at the European level. Harmonizing our strategy across Europe will send a strong message, not only to protect victims, but also to coordinate our efforts against network exploiting human vulnerability. I believe it's through such alignment that we truly combat sexual exploitation. Thank you for your attention.